Hi! Last week I released the piano accompany version of White Christmas. In this song there are chords of Diminished, 6th, dominant 7th, major 7th, Ad 9, 11th, 13th. I thought it was a good opportunity to do a tutorial with the aim of seeing together these chords and also others such as sus and diminished 7. So, in this video, I'm going to use the bass of White Christmas as a starting point to show you these chords. If you are completely inexperienced in the piano accompaniment, I would like to point out that there is also another theory video that I made about a year ago that explains the basics of the piano accompaniment. You'll find it in the channel. I'm not a native English speaker. I apologize for any translation errors and recommend that you put subtitles and translation in your language. Okay, let's start watching the intro of the song. In the introduction, we play these notes, which are the notes of an F sharp minor, and then we finish like this. On the right hand, we will therefore have A, F sharp minor, G sharp, E. To be less monotonous, we do this movement with 3 notes and initial faster and then slower. On the bass, we play a loud E to keep the sound longer, and repeat it more faintly to keep the sound. Ultimately, it's like this. And we end with let's stop at this E. Here I add the second note. This chord is an E with an added 9th. If we were in scale of C, we would play it by adding the note D. I would like to point out that in C scale, the note D is placed both in the 2nd degree and in the 9th degree. The chord I played is called C9, but there are also chords called C9 and C2 that always use the note D, but they are different and we will see them in the second part of the song. I can play an Ad 9 chord in 2 different ways. Let's see an example in C scale. In the first case, I can play the fundamental of the chord in the right hand, while in the second case I don't play the fundamental in the right hand. Now I'll play the notes according to these 2 patterns. And I want you to feel that in reality the note C on the right hand is not very relevant to the sonority of the chord, and that both sounds are almost similar. The advantage of using the second scheme is that it allows us to go from a C Ad 9 chord to a C chord. Let's see some examples. This was the short road, but there is also the long road. I think you have heard this last movement many times. For example, the Knocking on Heaven Door intro has this movement twice. All this means that from an Ad 9 chord I can go towards a C chord. All this means that if I have to play a C chord, I can anticipate that chord with an Ad 9 and improve the effectiveness of the accompaniment. This is especially effective on slow songs. Let's see as an example a passage of a White Christmas. The same thing also applies if you play the C9 chord with the fifth pattern, but it's more uncomfortable because you don't have a free C in your right hand. I would like to note that in the intro chords, the last chord is written as an E chord and is not written as an E at the ninth chord. Adding a ninth is something we can often do on our own. In White Christmas, for example, there are many A major chords. I play them differently, using the ninth note to avoid repeating the same passages. Using the 9, sus2 and sus4 instead of the normal chord are the simplest ways to try to give movement to a song. Okay, let's start with the song. The chords of the first verse are A, B flat diminished 7, B minor 7, E major 7, and then we end up on the E. Let's look at these chords one after the other. We can play the initial chord A like this here. I added the ninth note to A chord. So let's start with the chords of A and 9, and then we can go either on a B flat diminished 7 or B flat diminished. Warning, I just made a naming mistake. The chords you see on the screen can be indicated as B flat or A sharp diminished. However, I'm playing White Christmas, which is written in the key of A. So, in this case, I should call this chord A sharp diminished instead of B flat diminished. It doesn't matter. In this tutorial, let me also call it B flat diminished. Also note that the B flat chord is not part of the A scale, but we take it as a tension to end up on the B minor 7. Let's see the diminished 7th chords. You have to learn 3 positions with the right hand. First position, second position, third position. The left hand note determines the type of the chord. With a C on the bass, I get a C diminished 7. If I play an E flat on the bass, I play a E flat diminished 7. F sharp, A diminished 7. The same is true for the other positions, so here I have a D diminished 7th and so on. In our case, we have a B flat diminished 7, and I can play it like this. Let's look at the fundamental position of a diminished chord of C, E flat, G flat, A. If we look at the reversal, we can see that everyone has the pattern of the first position. If I don't play the fourth note, I get a diminished chord instead of a diminished 7th. A diminished chord is built starting from the major chord and decreasing the third and the fifth notes. Diminished 7th is built starting from the 7th chord and also decreasing the dominant 7th. Now, in this song, I do play a diminished chord without the 7th instead of a diminished 7th chord. Let's see why. In my opinion, diminished 7th chords love this movement very much. But in this song, I had already done this movement in the intro and in the initial chord. I didn't want to go heavy on too many notes. So I preferred not to play the 7th note and simplify the chord as a diminished chord instead of a 7th diminished one, and do a little arpeggio. I use the following rule of thumb. In general, it's possible to simplify a diminished 7th with a diminished. The reverse is not true. Let's look at this passage, B flat diminished and then B minor. I have already anticipated that in White Christmas we use a B flat diminished chord as a tension to go to the B minor. This is possible because a diminished 7th chord resolves its tension a semitone higher. So, for example, I can go from a C diminished 7th to a C sharp. I can also go towards a minor chord. Diminished and diminished 7th chords are tension chords because they have a triton. The triton consists of two notes that have an interval of 3 tones. If we take the scheme of a chord of C7, this is the triton. A diminished chord has a triton. A diminished 7th chord has 2 tritons. The next video will be completely dedicated to the 7th chords in the piano accompaniment. We'll complete the song in the third video.